So, do you want to be better able to manage your mindset when you're in the middle of a downswing, but you're not really sure why your play drops off so dramatically when you're running bad? In this video, I'm going to explain one of the most common mental triggers that gets activated when you're running bad. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Dr. Tricia Cardner, and I'm going to be breaking down loss aversion, which is a common cognitive bias that gets activated when we are in the throes of a losing streak. I'll break down the two most common adjustments that can lead to even greater losses and make it difficult to play your best. This short video is based on material from my online course, Escape from the Downswing Trap, which you can find more information about in the description box below. With all that said, let's get into it. The most common way that poker players attempt to cope with running bad is to try and control and reduce losses. This sounds completely reasonable because who wouldn't want to minimize their losses? Anyone in their right mind would want to, but it's the way in which poker players act to reduce those losses that can create a major problem. What often happens is that we choose behaviors in such a way that while yes, we minimize our losses potentially, the final result is reduced overall profits, missed opportunities, and in the end, even greater losses. So we end up achieving exactly the opposite of what we wanted. It's important to understand that it's not a loss in and of itself that causes our problematic behaviors. Rather, it's our reaction to the discomfort that we feel at the thought of another loss that actually causes us to behave erratically. So what kinds of loss aversion mistakes might we make? First, we might end up playing much more tightly than we should. For example, we might end up in a spot where, let's say we have ace-king, and we would normally 3-bet it, but we decide, oh no, my ace-king has lost every time tonight, so I'm not going to 3-bet it right now. By doing things like this, we think we are going to keep ourselves safe and our bankroll intact, but in fact, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. I want to introduce you to the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. They are two eminent research psychologists who have studied and described people's aversion to loss, and they first started publishing their findings in the 1970s. Since then, it's been well established through many studies that there is a bias in our mental machinery when it comes to losses, which has become known as loss aversion. Scientists have come to believe that our brains are hardwired to avoid loss because nature, it seems, doesn't want us to go around losing things without suffering the consequences for it. Frequent and constant losses would work against the survival of the species. You've probably heard a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. I'd say this saying captures the idea of loss aversion pretty well. Because of our evolutionary tendency to abhor losses, and because risk-taking involves the possibility of a loss, it's made most of us risk-averse, especially when we feel threatened. Across many studies, scientists have found that the psychological impact of loss is about 2 to 2.5 times the impact of a gain of equal size. What does this mean for poker players? Let's say you win a pot of $1,000. That feels pretty darn good. But now imagine that you lost a $1,000 pot. By order of magnitude, that $1,000 loss will actually feel about as painful as a $2,000 to a $2,500 loss. As Daniel Kahneman likes to say, losses loom larger in our minds than gains. Think about this from your own experience. Which do you remember better? Which have you felt more intensely? If you're like most poker players, you'll remember your losses much more clearly and with more recalled emotion than your wins. The bigger the loss, the more strongly it gets encoded into long-term memory. You will most likely recall that you spent much more time thinking about and reliving a large loss compared to a big win. And if you let yourself relive the experiences in your mind, you'll recall the intensity of the negative feelings of that loss way more sharply today than the happier feelings produced by a win, even though the loss may have occurred a long time ago. This is one situation where size definitely matters, because as the size of the loss increases, so will its psychological impact. Several small losses added together can also have a psychological impact that is similar to one large loss. As a practical matter, you can become emotionally devastated and mentally exhausted from losses you sustain, even if they occur over a series of sessions that you play. The cumulative psychological impact can be significant. Kahneman and Tversky also found that when you are on a losing streak, you can become more willing to gamble and engage in riskier behavior in order to stop the losses. Rationally, we know that risking more in poor situations is associated with more loss, but because we're experiencing such heightened loss aversion, we become more willing to take greater risk in hopes of preventing further losses. On the other hand, sometimes when we're up, we can become more conservative. That's because we seek to protect what we have. So that's something to think about too. We can either become too reckless or we can become too defensive and not make as much money or profit as we should. The main thing I want you to take away from this video is that it is quite easy to get trapped in these mind games where we try and prevent losses, but in doing so, we can actually make our situation that much worse. So I want you to be on guard for any loss-aversive tendencies that you might be exhibiting. If you notice that you're playing suboptimally, take a deep breath and think about what your overall strategy is and honestly assess if you are playing scared. If so, it's probably time to take a break so you can regroup and return in a better state of mind. Leave me a comment below and let me know which side of the loss aversion coin you usually end up on. Do you tend to gamble more in an effort to make up for your losses, or do you tend to tighten up in order to hopefully cut your losses? Besides considering if you gamble more to make up for your losses, or if you tighten up to preserve a small win, the most important reflection question you can ask yourself is, am I playing to the best of my ability, or am I letting fear get in my way? Once you know the answers to these questions, you'll be well on your way to playing your best, even if you're in the middle of a downswing. If you want to learn more strategies for dealing with the negative emotions that come with downswings, check out my course, Escape from the Downswing Trap, at peakpokermindset.com. And until next time, keep working on your mindset.